What would you do if you called someone's name and two people turned around? In September of 2019, Dr. Margaret Chen admitted a patient to Valley State Mental Health Facility. His name was David Kellerman, 34 years old, paranoid, terrified, convinced that someone had stolen his life. Standard psychiatric intake, standard delusion, standard case, until 18 days later, when police brought in another man. Same name, same face, same fingerprints, same DNA, and both of them were telling the truth. David Kellerman was, by all accounts, an ordinary man. A quiet life in a quiet city. He woke up early. He made his coffee the same way every morning. He took the same route to work. He called his mother every Sunday. He was the kind of man who remembered coworkers' birthdays, who held doors open, who never gave anyone a reason to look twice. And that is precisely what made what happened to him so deeply, profoundly wrong. Because on a Tuesday morning in September, an ordinary Tuesday like every other, David Kellerman left for work. He kissed no one goodbye, locked the door behind him, and when he came home that evening, someone was already sitting at his kitchen table, wearing his clothes, using his name, living his life. At least, that was the story David Kellerman told, and no one believed him. When officers found David Kellerman outside the downtown courthouse, he was beyond agitated. He wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't violent. He was begging. Someone is living my life. Someone stole who I am. You have to arrest him. Please, please. Police recognized the symptoms immediately. Paranoid delusion, possible psychotic break, a man who had lost his grip on reality. He was transported to Valley State Mental Health Facility for emergency psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Margaret Chen conducted the intake assessment. She documented his claims carefully. She had seen cases like this before. Capgras Syndrome, a rare condition where patients become convinced that the people around them have been replaced by identical imposters. But Kellerman's case had a twist. He didn't believe someone had replaced his family. He believed someone had replaced him. Dr. Chen prescribed antipsychotics, scheduled daily therapy, began reality testing protocols. David Kellerman was cooperative, calm, eerily certain. I know how this sounds, he told her during the first session. I know you think I'm sick, but I remember the exact moment I stopped being me. 18 days into treatment, the admissions department called Dr. Chen with an urgent message. Police were bringing in a second psychiatric emergency case. A man claiming someone had stolen his identity. A man currently being treated at their facility. His name was David Kellerman. Dr. Chen walked into the intake room expecting a confused family member. Someone swept up in the first patient's delusion. It happens sometimes. What she found instead stopped her cold. Same height, same weight, same facial structure, same scar from an appendectomy on the right side, same broken nose from a childhood accident, same distinctive birthmark on the left shoulder, same voice, same eyes, two men, one identity, and both of them looking at her with the same desperate, exhausted expression. The face of someone who has been telling the truth for days and has not once been believed. Dr. Chen ordered every test available. Fingerprint analysis, dental records, physical examination, and finally, DNA. The fingerprint lab called back first. Both men matched the prints on file for David Kellerman. Not similar, identical. The dental records matched. The physical markers matched. And when the independent laboratory returned the DNA results, Dr. Chen read the report 3 times before she trusted what she was seeing. Both samples shared identical genetic markers. Not similar the way siblings are similar. Identical, as if the same person had been tested twice. The most most obvious explanation was the one everyone reached for first. Twins, identical twins, separated at birth, raised apart, and now colliding under impossible circumstances. It happened in old cases, adoptions gone undocumented, records lost in fires, hospitals that didn't always ask questions. Dr. Chen spent days chasing this thread. Birth records, hospital archives, family interviews. She spoke to Kellerman's mother, his aunt, a cousin who had known him since childhood. No twin, no adoption, no gaps in the documented history of David Kellerman's life. He had been born alone. He had grown up alone. He had lived until this moment as one singular person. The twin theory died quietly, and in its place grew something no medical textbook had a chapter for. The two men were kept strictly separated. Staff began calling them Kellerman A and Kellerman B, though both objected violently to any label that suggested they weren't the original. And here is where the case took its most disturbing turn, because they weren't just identical in appearance, they were identical in behavior. When one improved in therapy, the other improved at exactly the same rate. When one had a setback, the other experienced the same setback on the same day. When one reported a bad night's sleep, the other had dreamed the same dream. Dr. Chen began to wonder if she was treating one person who had somehow fractured. On November 2nd, Dr. Chen made a decision that her colleagues would later question at length. She arranged a controlled meeting, direct confrontation, a proven technique in delusional disorders. If one man was experiencing a psychotic break, seeing his own face might force a breakthrough. The meeting took place in a secure conference room. Both men entered from opposite doors, and they saw each other. What followed lasted less than 30 seconds. Both men began screaming, not with confusion, not with anger, but with recognition. The specific, bottomless horror of a person staring into a mirror that has no right to exist. "That's me," they both said. At exactly the same moment, in exactly the same voice, with exactly the same inflection, both men collapsed. Both were sedated. Both recovered physically within hours. But psychologically, the confrontation had not resolved anything. It had confirmed the one possibility that Dr. Chen had been afraid to write in any official document. What if they were both real? On November 8th, Dr. Chen arrived at Valley State to begin her morning rounds. She checked the patient census. One David Kellerman, not two. One. She walked to room 247, the room assigned to Kellerman B, empty, bed stripped, no personal items, no clothing, no chart in the door slot. She checked the administrative files. One admission record for David Kellerman, dated September 15th. No second admission, no transfer, no discharge, as if Kellerman B had never existed. She found the nursing staff, the orderlies, the security guards who had monitored both. No one remembered a second patient. She pulled the security footage from the days both men had been present. The footage showed one David Kellerman moving through the facility. Just one. Dr. Chen stood in the hallway outside room 247 for a long time. Her own memory was perfectly clear. Two men, identical, screaming in unison in a conference room. Her personal notes described both patients in exhaustive detail. But the world around her had quietly rearranged itself into a version where only one had ever existed. The remaining David Kellerman was discharged 3 weeks later, fully recovered, ready to return to his life. During their final session, Dr. Chen asked him directly, "Do you remember another version of yourself? Another man who claimed to be you?" Kellerman looked at her with clear, calm eyes. "I think my medication is working," he said. "I don't remember being worried about identity theft." He smiled, thanked her for her care, walked out through the main entrance, and as Dr. Chen she noticed something. In the lobby, near the door, he paused, just for a moment, and looked back over his shoulder, not at Dr. Chen, at something beside her, something she couldn't see. Then he walked out into the daylight and did not look back again. No explanation was ever found. No case file was ever opened. No official record ever acknowledged that two identical men had occupied the same psychiatric facility for 23 days in the fall of 2019. Dr. Chen kept her personal notes, detailed documentation of both patients, transcripts from individual sessions, records of the confrontation meeting, and her own observation, written in careful clinical language, of the moment she believed she had witnessed something that medicine had no framework to contain. Those notes remain locked in a private folder. No hospital record will ever acknowledge them. And somewhere tonight, David Kellerman is living his ordinary life, making his coffee the same way every morning, taking the same route to work, remembering, or not remembering, what it felt like to look across a room and see himself staring back. Some cases are closed because they're solved. Some are closed because the answers would require us to question everything we believe about identity, about the self, about whether one person can truly only ever be one person. The file on David Kellerman reads, recovered, discharged, no further concerns. But in the margin of Dr. Chen's private notes, the ones no official record will ever see, she wrote 4 words. Which one went home? Dr. Margaret Chen did not stop thinking about David Kellerman. That is the part no one tells you about cases like this. The patient recovers, the file closes, the institution moves forward. But the doctor remains. She returned to her normal schedule. She saw her other patients. She attended her supervision meetings. She submitted her reports on time. And every morning when she walked through the lobby of Valley State, she paused at the spot where David Kellerman had looked back over his shoulder. At something she couldn't see. She told herself it was professional curiosity. She told herself it was the ordinary residue of an unusual case. She told herself this for 4 months. Then, in February of 2020, Dr. Chen received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from a city she had never visited. Inside, a single sheet of paper. On it, in careful handwriting she did not recognize. You were right to keep the notes. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. No indication of how anyone could have known she had kept them at all. She reported the letter to hospital administration. They filed it under miscellaneous correspondence. They did not open an investigation. She filed it in the same private folder as her notes on the Kellerman case, and went back to work. 3 months after the letter, Dr. Chen requested access to Valley State's admission records for September and October of 2019. The archivist found one record for that period. David Kellerman, admitted September 15th, discharged November 28th, no second admission, no second discharge. She asked the archivist to check for any record that had been deleted, modified, or reclassified. The archivist looked at her with polite confusion. Records can't just disappear, she said. That's not how our system works. Dr. Chen thanked her and left. She drove home in silence. She made dinner. She watched something on television she couldn't later remember. She tried to sleep. At 3:14 in the morning, she got up and went to her desk. She opened the private folder. She spread her notes across the desk the way she had done 100 times before. The intake documents, the session transcripts, the confrontation meeting record, the DNA results. And she read through all of it. All of it. And she noticed something she had never noticed before. In the session transcripts from the first David Kellerman, the one admitted on September 15th, there was a phrase she had written in elongated writing, a phrase she could not remember writing. always assumed that what she witnessed was something that happened to David Kellerman, something that arrived from outside, an anomaly, an accident, a glitch in the machinery of identity that no one could explain. But what if it wasn't something that happened to him? What if it was something he had been carrying with him all along? What if David Kellerman had always been two people, held together by the ordinary pressure of a normal life? And one September morning, under circumstances she would never be able to document, that pressure had simply released. She did not write this theory in her official notes. She did not present it at a conference. She did not tell her colleagues. Because the moment she allowed herself to believe it fully, the moment she accepted that identity was not a fixed thing, not a stable fact of biology, she would have to ask the next question, the one she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Which one knew? Because one of those men, for 3 weeks, had shared a building with a version of himself. One of them had screamed in that conference room. One of them had woken up in November and found the world had quietly arranged itself so that the other had never existed. One of them had walked out through the lobby and paused at the door and looked back at something she couldn't see. And one of them, just one, was living his quiet life right now, making his coffee the same way every morning, taking the same route to work, calling his mother every Sunday, carrying somewhere beneath the surface of his perfectly ordinary life the knowledge of what he was, or what he had done, or what the world had helped him become. Dr. Chen locked the folder away. She has not opened it since. She still works at Valley State. She still conducts intake assessments. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, a new patient arrives, agitated, terrified, convinced that someone has stolen their life. And Dr. Chen sits across from them with her clipboard and her careful clinical attention, and she listens.